So Mary Catherine's name is on the front of the order of service, but I'm not going to introduce her because she said she wanted to be introduced by a friend. And as we are a welcoming congregation, we're somewhat flexible. We try to do things different. I'm going to ask her friend, Becky Wilson, to come up and introduce Mary Catherine, who will then deliver this morning's sermon.
I was very honored when Mary Catherine asked me to introduce her. It happens that I am one of just a few of her friends who knew her when she had legs. And she wanted me to tell you a little bit about who she was back then. I first met Mary Catherine when I joined a meditation group that she was attending. And it was a really small group, so all of those of us who were in the group got to know each other pretty well. I remember Mary Catherine as a very physically active woman who had a real zest for life. For example, she taught preschoolers full-time, but had plenty of energy left for extensive biking, and I remember once that she took an exhausting training for her life-saving certification. During the summers, she and her husband David often went to the mountains of Colorado for hiking and camping. Another thing I learned about Mary Catherine was that she has an extraordinary will to survive and thrive. After she contracted a very rare disease, she was in a medically induced coma for months. And for most of that time, she was fighting for her life, literally. There was one dark period when the doctors didn't think she would survive. But Mary Catherine had a young family. She and David had decided to wait to start their family. And when this happened, her son Colton was still a baby and her daughter Clarissa was a toddler. And Mary Catherine was determined to be there for them, to see them grow up. I think the qualities that she exhibited back then stood her well when she had to meet the challenge of recreating her life. And her desire to live life to the fullest and her extraordinary warrior spirit have been such an inspiration to those of us who know and love her.
Good morning. I'm going to get a little taller so you can see me. Okay, that's good. Good morning. Good morning. Thank you for inviting me to speak today. When I was 20 years old, I was going to a community college, and I was working at a local potato chip factory. The pay was excellent, the warm, fresh chips were delicious, but the environment wasn't very stimulating. If my mother hadn't insisted I apply for a position at a Catholic grade school, I may have missed my calling. I was an assistant for a Montessori class for 3 to 6-year-olds. Within the first week, it was pretty obvious I loved working with these little people. They were curious about everything. They inspired me to keep that curious streak that we all possess in youth. I just finished my 30th year of teaching with young children, and I'm still just as passionate about my career choice as I was back then. I believe we all need inspiration in our life at one point or another. To me, inspiration has been a wonderful factor in creating richer experiences and memories. Also, it has guided me in getting through a near-life death trauma. It occurred to me the other day that perhaps one of our purposes on earth is to inspire others, intentionally or not. Perhaps your personal inspirations come from viewing a spectacular sunset, or hearing about a new scientific discovery, tasting your friend's delicious chili, admiring how well she can cook, or witnessing or participating in a service project done joyfully. The list goes on and is different for every person. Growing up in Michigan in a big family, I'm the sixth of 9 children, taught me many important virtues that I found invaluable later in life. There was a great deal of cooperation in my home growing up, trying to keep the family running smoothly. We owned a station wagon and a whole row of bicycles on the back porch, for fun and for transportation. I recall my mother cooking huge pots of mashed potatoes and redistributing the clutter around the house. The rest of the daily chores, such as laundry, washing the dirty pans, or cleaning the bathrooms, were all done by me and my siblings. Once a week, we simply rotated tasks, so you couldn't get out of your job. Between that and the paper route that kept passing along, yes, I had a turn too, we learned responsibility early in life. Childhood is also where I cultivated a love and respect for nature. I really did look forward to our summer camping travels, but not the part where my dad cut all of our hair really short. I mean, really short. My mom said it was easier to keep short hair clean when we were camping. Trying to raise a large family on a high school teacher's salary, camping was about the only vacation we could afford. But I didn't mind it at all. Many of the gifts of character were modeled to me when I was growing up, and they weren't always from my own family. Several important virtues that have helped me in my transition from a tall, willowy woman to a sack of potatoes rolling around with a smile. You're seeing the acceptable parts. These virtues include the following, in no particular order: perseverance, kindness, enthusiasm, creativity, compassion, humility, courage, lots of courage, patience, and integrity. And of course, humor. I've always had a sense of adventure and curiosity, though I couldn't act fully upon it as a child. However, when I left home, I was even more inspired to travel the world after hearing tales of fellow world travelers. So in my later years in college, I studied in Spain for a year and traveled too, always on my bicycle. I got to know the land and the people intimately. My most memorable trip to date is still the 5 weeks of pedaling 2,000 kilometers with a girlfriend through Western Europe. What a joy that was. After my year abroad, I returned to teaching and a summer job in Estes Park, Colorado, as a hiking counselor. That's where I met my dear husband, David. He was a backpacking counselor. Since my husband was also a teacher at that point, we had the flexibility to travel and camp during the summer, inspired by all the roofless cathedrals that are out there in nature. We both decided we wanted to start a family later. I would get my fill of children during the day and then send them home after school. In hindsight, I'm very thankful that my husband and I had those years to bond and really enjoy our couple times together before our children arrived, and an unexpected life change. At 38, I had given birth to our second child. With a toddler and a newborn, We packed up our little apartment here in Tucson and headed off for the summer to camp in Colorado in a pop-up camper. I had just gotten a teaching position in Flagstaff. So our travels ended there, and we set up house amongst the tall pine trees, eager to raise our little family in a smaller town with 4 distinct seasons. Life was good, but it was short-lived. By January, I was heading south to Phoenix in a medical emergency jet through a snowstorm, racing the clock to save my life. I had gone into school after Christmas to put away the decorations in my classroom. A wooden cheese box parted with the tiniest sliver of wood and lodged in my hand. I pulled it out and wiped away the drop of blood and continued on. Later, I discovered that was the point of entry for the necrotizing fasciitis, better known as the flesh-eating bacteria. I had infected myself unknowingly. The bacteria was living on my skin, and the doctors suspected my immune system was compromised due to necessary steroids to keep my ulcerative colitis under control. 1 in a million people contract this bacteria, and a mere 10 to 20% survive its ravages. You have a much greater chance of winning the lottery than contracting necrotizing fasciitis, so breathe easy. The next 3 weeks were very intense for my family. I think my husband had the most to worry about, for I was in a coma, apparently visiting other people. I was told later, while I was unconscious, that I had helped a few folks with some very personal issues that they were going through. In the first weeks, I had up to 3 surgeries a day. That's how aggressive the bacteria was. Thus the need for a trach, you know. My body was shutting down and rejecting all the medicines. There were nightly prayer circles being held, literally all over the globe. The power of prayer was at work. Both my legs had to be amputated within the first week. I was in intensive care for many weeks. In the very beginning, the doctors weren't very hopeful that I was going to make it. They had a conversation next to my bed while I was in the coma, commenting how dismal things were looking. They needed to tell my husband that if I had any family that wanted to see me alive, they needed to get there within the next 24 hours. And come they did, by plane and car. The strange thing was, after that conversation, I made ever so tiniest improvements. The doctors were hopeful. I believe I heard them on some level. The mind is a powerful and mysterious thing. I wanted to stay. I didn't want to leave my husband and children. I wanted to be part of my children's life. I had a job to complete, mothering my 2 dear innocent children. They were my inspiration to stay. I have no doubt about that. The operations continued. My entire abdomen looks like this. It's not a pretty sight. I had skin taken off my back twice for skin grafts, and amazingly, they all took. Of the 24 surgeries I had in 6 weeks, I remember signing only 1 release form. My husband had to make some pretty serious decisions. The universe was very supportive through my journey. A kindly grandmother stepped forward to watch her children so David could be by my side daily. My boss honored my teaching contract and continued to pay my salary. My husband was working on his dissertation at that point and was the primary caregiver to our children. There were diaper drives put into action by the school in Flagstaff and in Tucson. Everyone knew we had no relatives within states of us. I was away from my family for 7 months, though I did get to see my children after 2 months. I spent the final 2 months in a nursing home. I hope I never have to go back there. Then we returned to Tucson to start a new life. I don't really ponder the question, why me? It's a fruitless question. Some things in life are a mystery with no definitive answers, only contemplations. It is what it is. The question I asked myself was, what am I going to do with this new challenge in life? We settled into a small apartment. The only thing that was accessible was a little ramp they built up to the door. Daily living tasks were frustrating. Nothing was set up for me. Then one day, a friend suggested we apply for a Habitat for Humanity house. Each year, among the many houses they build, one is specially designed to be accessible. To my shock, we were the family that was chosen. After turning down the first home offered to us due to its faraway location from our support system, we were put on the bottom of the list. We looked long and hard for land on the east side. I told my husband, if I had to sit in this chair for the rest of my life, I needed an inspirational view. And we found it. A single lot with a view of the south side of the Catalina mountain range. Every day I enjoy watching how the light, especially the sunsets, changes the shading of the mountains, and the clouds and the snow giving ever-changing, inspiring views. I love our little, totally accessible home. It makes daily life a little bit easier in a wheelchair. I think last summer, while I traveled to Michigan and Montana with my daughter, I finally embraced the reality that I am an inspiration to others, including my own siblings. They still seem emotionally scarred by my misfortunate mishap. Since I live so far from my relatives, if we want to see them, we need to travel to see them. And since I do live so far off the beaten path, I'm the only one in Tucson, we seldom get out-of-town visitors. My daughter Clarissa and I traveled 7,000 miles in 7 weeks. Seeing as we were 2 women traveling alone, I thought it would be wise to take our dog Snoopy along. He was a great traveler. In the beginning, I had my reservations about the trip. Was I biting off more than I could handle? It took me months to prepare. I took the bench seats out of our van and turned it into a bedroom/kitchen/bathroom. My daughter slept in a pup tent, and Snoopy got the driver's seat. We visited 37 people, mostly relatives. Our guardian angels were working overtime some days. We had our adventures, like sleeping through a tornado and having to bungee cord the door closed for a couple thousand miles. But we made it home safely with lots of photos and warm memories and a great feeling of accomplishment. My brothers were all very concerned that their little sister was driving a 1997 van with 214,000 miles on it on such a long journey. The majority of the problems came from the lift and the automatic door. The engine for the door finally burned up, thus the need for the bungee cords. Wanting me to be safer, one of my brothers started a Fundly site to help me purchase a new van. I'm so excited. We are nearing our goal. I have never had a brand new car in my life. We're a little shy still on the conversions, which is another $15,000, but I trust that the divine will continue to support me. People often tell me, you should write a book. I have to chuckle under my breath, thinking, when? In my spare time? What spare time? Over the years, I've learned to respond with a kind smile and then say, someday maybe I'll write my memoirs, but right now, I'm still living the book. Another common remark I hear is, you are so courageous. I could never do what you have to do every day. I don't believe that. Life is a series of choices, from what you're going to have for breakfast to saying yes to that marriage proposal. In traumatic, life-changing situations, we all have the choice to rise to the occasion or to wilt away from society and into ourselves. I figured I wasn't going to be much use to my children and husband if I were having a constant pity party. So I try to make the most of each and every day, for tomorrow is not guaranteed. Since being in nature has been very influential to me over the years, I try to get outside as often as possible, whether it's watering my plants, enjoying the view of the mountains, or going for a bike ride on my fabulous 27-speed hand cycle. I'm forever thankful I can still ride a bike. Then there's Snoopy, my beloved Dalmatian dog. He is a rescue dog and definitely a part of our family. Daily, he inspires me to be in the moment. Life seems richer when I'm in the moment. Snoopy also reminds me to be non-judgmental, to give all my unconditional love to those that I care about, and above all, he models extreme patience. My children continue to be my daily inspiration. My daughter is 18 now, and she's off to NAU in Flagstaff in the fall. At 5'8", she is a grounded young lady, reminding me of my younger self with those long legs. My son is now 16 and thriving very well. My hope is my husband and I will be sending 2 shining lights out into the world instead of 2 burdens to society. So far, so good. I refuse to live an unexamined life, and daily inspiration helps me live each day to the fullest, participating in and appreciating all my sorrows and all my joys. May you find moments or be the moment of daily inspiration to others. Thank you.